only vent well water, and where do they want to discharge it?
Yes, well, it is, it's the shallow Mississippi River aquifer vent well water. The same, what they're gathering right now, it's pretty much the same, and it will be discharged into the contained area.
Y'all checking the salinity of the water in Bayou Corn itself, like at the bottom?
Yeah, all of our, we have sample sites in Bayou Corn, and we do depth readings, you know, at lower, mid, and upper. And we have one location that's very close to, between Bayou Corn, where it's closest to the South Burnham. We have an ambient station there, and it got pretty low during the summer to where we couldn't take 3 readings. We only did a mid, but yeah, we do a bottom, mid, and upper, and it gathers salinity and conductivity and TDS, which are all interrelated.
Tom, a couple of statements I'd like to make before I get to my question. I just want y'all to know that just because there's not a lot of people here tonight, we're not apathetic. We have a lot of people that had to go to another meeting, so there's a lot of concern about this. And the second thing is, we'd like y'all to come back more often than once every 3 months, okay? Come back once a month, once every 6 weeks, and update us on the situation. We appreciate what y'all doing, okay? Okay, now my question is, on the open air venting, you heard our displeasure with it, and yet we allowed Texas Brine to do it anyway. Do you have any input into that, or were you able to prevent that, or are your hands tied because Texas Brine knows what they want to do, or how does that work? Because an open air vent was put right next to Sauce Piquant, and I believe, John, there wasn't even any monitoring there for 3 weeks. Is that true?
I don't know if it was 3 weeks, but that was a time period. It was, the air monitoring was supposed to be placed and was not.
There was no bubbling there before, okay? Now we're purposely venting the methane into the air in John neighborhood, okay? There was no monitoring, but a period of time, there was no way to quantify how much gas came out of the ground right there. Well, from what I hear now, there's no gas left there. But how much was released into there? Can you kind of brief us on that? Tell us what's going on.
Sure. I'll try to remember the series of questions. Yeah, DEQ definitely has input on the vent well process. I recall a couple of previous meetings, including 2 at the command center, one of the trailers, where it was discussed Texas Brine's desire to install shallow vent wells, passive vent wells, in certain locations, a couple of which were going to be in the community. So we were cognizant of that, and more or less following along with Incident Command and the other agencies to see whether that was going to be an effective method or not. You know, I'm not sure anybody really knew how effective it would be and whether it was going to accomplish goals that made it worth doing at all. When I heard that that there was 1 or 2 that were located in the community that monitors weren't set up on, we immediately shifted our guys every day they're out there to monitor around those locations. So we started monitoring around those passive vent wells as soon as we were, mindful that they were there and they were operating. I think there were a total of 3, and at any one given time, was it 1 or 2 that may have been?
Just 1 or 2 that had produced some shown level of some gas.
Right, and then we worked with DNR and CBI to collect a sample, and what we were gonna try to do is work out an arrangement to where when the mammal was down there, we could pull a sample off the port of the vent well and then have it monitored on the mantle. The problem, and we did that once, the problem is that the mantle is designed to monitor ambient air, you know, at very, very, very low concentrations. And what we had with this is, I recall that the well had to be shut in for like 24 hours in order for enough pressure to build up in it to even get a sample. So that did happen, you know, and then we did get a sample, and I think there was an H2S reading of maybe 6 to 8 or parts per million. Yeah. So we met with DNR and discussed what would be necessary for the company to do in order to quantify, because that reading, a 6 part per million or an 8 part per million of H2S, there was no context to it. You know, it could be, you could have a big, huge coke stack that has a concentration of 6, but overall it's a huge loading. Or you can have that little pipe that's barely got a trickle coming out, that's got 6, that it took 24 hours to gather it, and then one little grab of it wasn't telling us anything. So we decided that what we were going to do was advise them, if they felt like they were going to continue to want to use that approach anyway, of using these vent wells, that they were going to have to take extra, they were going to have to model it. They were going to have to, you know, do more calculations and make determinations as to how much, you know, and you can't do it with a grab. They would have to have a continuous monitor. Our standards go, you know, 24 hours, it's a 24-hour reading. So, and some of them even go several days. So it was kind of, it dawned on us that these wells, the 2 that were in the community, really, to me, weren't worth the trouble. You know, I didn't think they were worth the trouble. And when I heard that they were P&A, I felt like that was probably the best thing for these, under those circumstances, the way they were being, you know, the way they were being used. There wasn't enough gas there to gather and move. There certainly wasn't enough to flare. And if the wells were going to work the way they were designed, there was going to be even more gas in the community. So I didn't see the logic, quite frankly, in the way where they were and how they were operating.
And neither did we, and that's what the question is: why did we allow that to happen? Why do we allow free venting of the gas into the community? If when they had another well kind of right next to it, that they could have vented it with a Ventura system and sucked it out. And there was no sense in doing it. To us, it looked like Texas Brine was doing just to piss us off, and which they've been doing quite a bit. So you know, that's
you know, from the air monitoring component, that's what our concern was. The air monitoring component, and we didn't get any readings. There was a very small amount of gas being vented, 8 or however many feet high, and it basically was immeasurable. We couldn't measure it.
right, but you didn't know that before they stuck the pipe in the ground. You had no idea what was coming out. So if it's just a little bit, then fine. But what if there's a large amount? What and the monitoring is done around the bottom. What if that wind blows it? You know, and it blows it into the community, and it's a high level of hydrogen sulfide. You don't know that unless you carefully monitor these things, and when you put them in, and you just don't let them do things like that. That's all I can say. I mean, I threw up my hands in the air.
Well, I would say that needs to be a consideration for any.
You got to remember that there's still people living there. There's people that drive on that highway. So that's all I'm saying. Okay, I ain't gonna get into any deal about it.
I'll just say Texas Brine is the responsible party. They have the responsibility, as set by the objective, to remove the gas. So they are the responsible party and should be doing things in an appropriate way.
Who approved it? Who approved their plan?
It was a plan that was submitted for review. I'll say it was reviewed by DNR as well as myself.
Well, why is it that instead of freely, if you're going to let it freely flow into the atmosphere, why didn't you have some way of monitoring what the volume that's coming out and the type of gases and stuff that's coming out of it? I mean, that is such an irresponsible thing to do to people in this community.
I don't think it got to that point, you know, it never
No,
really got to that
in
point.
the planning stage, there should have been planning for monitors and stuff to do that. They shouldn't have been put in without that.
It never got to that point,
they
but
were-
the
they
potential
were in-
for it to get to that point.
My
was there.
comments to them, in their plan that was provided for the PVWs was the air monitoring. It was reinforced by DNR that that shall be in place. Now, and you and I know what happened with the site on Gumbo and Salisbury Point, that they didn't do it, and I agree that it was not there. But it was instructed to Texas Bryan when they installed these as a protective measure that air monitoring be on site. And they were instructed.